welcome to the BioCharisma podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Gardner. Today we have Dr. Barre Lando and Mike Winner of the AlphaCast podcast that's on YouTube. These two guys are up in the great state of Jefferson, the nice little null-free zone between Oregon and California, state of California, and they're crushing. Mike is a former DJ, now firefighter, permaculturist, amongst 10 other things. And Dr. Barre Lando, you're going to hear in this podcast just the multitude of different things that this man has been exposed to. This podcast, I just wanted to get to know these guys. I've been on their AlphaCast and I haven't had a chance to actually know them. You know, I've heard their AlphaCast for the last 2 years. And I just wanted to get to understand where they're coming from with things. And, you know, Dr. Barre has been dropping little hints that this, that, and the other are about to happen. And I wanted to kind of see where he was coming from with that. So enjoy the podcast. I really thought it was a cool talk between three dudes that, you know, kind of have a sympathetic resonance, and it builds on a bunch of the other podcasts of this season where just understanding the heart and the mind of a fully embodied man and what you can do with that. And so I will see you on the flip side.
What kind of rower do you have there? Oh, sorry. Sorry. I get on these things and just want to talk about whatever.
No, it's good.
I was just asking you what kind of rower you have.
What kind of what? Oh, my wife has a Total Gym XLS. That's my wife's. I actually use.
Oh, that's a Total Gym.
Yeah. I actually use Dr. Doug Janquish's X3 system. Have you seen those?
Oh, do you like that? Yeah, I've seen it. And know a lot of people are getting them. You like it?
I love it. Because I was a big fan of all the, what was it used to be called? It wasn't Bowflex. It was what were the old machines that had the eccentric cams on them back in the day?
I think that was Bowflex. Or are you thinking of Nautilus equipment?
Nautilus. Back in the day with the Nautilus. Yeah, I never got injured using Nautilus, and we used to do pretty heavy weights. So with the X3 system, I love it because you have to use all your stabilizing muscles. Yeah, and to me, that's just the best way to do it. It's very much
variable resistance, right? Like it picks up as you go up. What we used to do is we'd have big heavy chains.
Nice.
And like, say you're doing a squat or a chin up, doesn't matter. You put them over and then you got a pile of chains on the floor. Oh. But then when you get to the top of the position, you know, whatever exercise, then all of a sudden you got the full weight of the chains. So the weight kept going up the more you went up there. Yeah, we kind of created that. And then the new generation of folks picked up on that a few years ago.
Yeah, you were a hog molly, weren't you? You were an offensive lineman?
Defensive end, and I was a certified Neanderthal for sure.
That's awesome. So this is a good way to.
He was forced on the O-line against his will.
Today on the BioCharisma.
Well, then I got off.
Yeah. Dr. Barre Lando and his cohort, Mike Winner. We're just getting into talking about our workout regimens. I could only imagine what you've seen when it comes to the actual, I guess you would say, progression in training with the current athletes. Have you seen like teams like the Miami Heat will not do free weights? They'll only use the Janquish system, like the X3 system.
Yeah. I've seen that. I was wondering how authentic it was, because behind the scenes, sometimes you just being in the business, I know a lot of guys aren't going to give up on doing 500-pound squats and everything, because that's how
Yeah.
you get beefed, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I like the sports where you have to be a little bit more athletic, where it's not all about mass, like in
Hmm.
basketball. I know a bunch of pro surfers and they work out, but everything about them is keeping their mobility, and to
Yeah.
have these systems where you're always using all your supporting muscles. I think that was a big drawback to a lot of the weight training I did in the past was we used a lot of total strength. I think it's called total strength machines. And dude, those busted us up. There was nothing
Yeah.
eccentric about those. That was all like free weight on rails. And man, I didn't do it right. I
Yeah.
know ego would get in the way. So I would love
I
for you.
hmm?
Oh, go ahead.
No, please, you go.
So I feel very simpatico with you as someone that's I said in the introduction about how you're a fully embodied man. And I don't know much about you, Mike. I feel like you're you're a very embodied man also, but more on the musical side of things. I'm because I'm a musical idiot. I tend to really be able to talk more about athletics and that side of thing, just because that was my venue more so than music. Even though I love music theory. Ooh, that was interesting. Even though I love music theory, but Dr. Bear Lando, what was give my audience a little bit of background to your upbringing and what brought you into athletics and where you went with that.
Yeah. So yeah, I come from a different era, as you can imagine. And my parents, we're all offspring of immigrants from South America and Italy. So I
Mhm.
grew up with a lot of the old, you know, country kind of customs and culture. And also, which was interesting, is I came from a family of boxers. It seems
No.
like everybody in that's that. In fact, my grandfather from Peru, he was a international known fighter, and that's how he got to the U.S. in the first place. And that's another whole interesting story. But it seemed like everybody on both sides, they were all either Golden Glove champs or pros or whatever. And I could get a
Mhm.
little deeper into some kind of interesting connections here. But yeah, that's I've kind of fell into athletics. I was a four-sport athlete. I in high school, and played all the three sports, and then threw and showed up at track meets in the middle of baseball games and stuff. I was trying to play both at the same time. And so anyway, yeah, I did all those sports and then got athletic scholarships, got quite a few scholarship offers out of college for stuff, or out of high school. And I wanted to train more scientifically.
Mhm.
And when I first got to college, I was pretty good size because I had the ability to bulk up naturally. And I heard the trainer was giving out these magic little blue pills that make you big and strong. And you have to understand, this is back in the 60s, before
Mhm.
college teams were put on probation, for all these things. So it was the wild west of football back then. So I went
What
in
were
there to
the
get mine.
what were
Diana Ball at that point was
okay.
steroid. And I went in to get mine. I was stoked. I mean, what 17-year-old meathead wouldn't want a little pill that makes you big and strong? And the trainer said, nah, you're 265 already. You're a freshman. We just want to refine, which and he said the guys we're giving those to are, need to get to where you're at and everything. So I was disappointed, but I went to the school library and started really researching. In high school, never picked up a book, but this was something that interested me. So all of a sudden, I'm doing scholarly research in a medical library. And,
Mhm.
what I found about side effects and everything scared me. And so I never used steroids, but I can tell you to this day, most folks in collegiate and college, professional sports are all doing something or a
Mhm.
lot, and they just know how to beat it. It's gotten pretty sophisticated. Fortunately, because I didn't go down that road, I got really technical about my training. And I was kind of a group of a few individuals where we went to that modern era of training that you see popularized now in professional sports, where everybody's, doing some pretty sophisticated things. And so we started the first wave of that. And then when I decided to wrap up my sports career, I stayed very active to this day in the martial arts and things, which, require training. But martial arts now introduced me to another level of training. So I kind of unbulked a lot and went more for mobility and things like you're talking about. Even though in football, I had to be fast, it's not like you're just a bodybuilder or something. But that took me to another level. And then I thought, what better thing than to pursue my knowledge of the human anatomy and physiology, which is what which really interested me for my own training, than to go to medical school. So I ended up doing that.
That's incredible. So how many years, what college did you play football at? UCLA?
Out of high school, I went to Washington, and they had me on the O line, which I hated. And so after 2 years, I quit, transferred, thought I was going to, to a Big 8 school. I ended up going to Utah State, which was independent back then. This is, a long time ago. And it was the top independent above Notre Dame or Penn State or anybody back then, as far as one loss, more people in pros. And back then, I thought I still want a pro career. So it was a good place. So I went to Utah State, and what really won me over about Utah State, we were 14th in the nation my last year there. So, we had a good team. And, but what really won me over to go there in the first place is the coach who's worked under Hank Stram as the offensive coordinator for the old Kansas City Chiefs. He had me as a defensive end, which was more my natural position. And also they had unbelievable skiing right in the area. So that was the final win. So I skied my ass off for, 4 years, and, went to graduate school there just so I could justify skiing for another couple of years. And
priority.
And then, moved on. So that's kind of it. And then I, did a certification at Stanford for emergency medicine. I was an MD, but a different kind of certification, because it was kind of this new experimental program that was exciting. And then I did that for a few years. And then I ended up deciding just to go more into alternative. And I had to go to different schools for that. So I went to a 4-year naturopathic college, then went to chiropractic college, and then did a whole bunch of training with people abroad into the bioterrain medicine, and, certified in osteopathic techniques and meridian therapy and all sorts of goodies like that. So that's kind of the short of it.
So with all that schooling, you just graduated like last year.
I did last year. Geez, and shoot, I was already in my 40s by then.
Geez, man, that is a lot. I mean, life
I'm
in and of itself is an educational, classroom.
Look at the wall, Topher. Look at the wall behind him. There's all the certs and all the little,
that's what I'm saying,
pieces of paper they give you for going to those places.
Yes, and my terminology for the pieces of paper or BSMS and PhD was bullshit, more shit, and piled high and deep. So I'm not a big fan of the academic process, but I did learn some things for the trade that I ended up, becoming my vocation.
Well, what's really cool is, like, whenever I hear about somebody that comes from athletic progeny, a lot of times the one thing that translates is discipline. So obviously in your life, you had a tremendous amount of discipline to be able to go through in your own athletic career, and then go through your medical career, and then go into all these different highly refined modalities. You would have to have the capacity to focus. That would absolutely have to be there. And, I know professional athletes, they have the capacity to focus. It's kind of cool that your grandfather was a boxer, because my grandfather was a all-American boxer at Michigan State.
Oh,
So,
great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's 150 pounds. I don't know I think that's a middleweight. What is that? I don't know what that classification was back in the 40s.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is now.
Yeah.
Bear, was it your grandfather? Was it your grandfather? Your great grandfather? Was it an Olympian too? Swimmer?
So the short story on him is he came up from Peru, in his fighting career, because he fought internationally, brought him all over the place. He hooked up and became lifelong friends with oh geez, why am I drawing a blank? With the well-known author.
Who
Let
wrote
me get
White
back.
Fang and
Yeah, Jack London.
Jack
Sorry. My mind was going different directions. So
London.
Jack London. So those guys palled around. And so anyway, my grandfather came up, ended up in San Francisco. He had a crappy job because he was kind of dark complexion and worked in the foundry at Simmons Mattress Company. But he did, kept boxing. He decided to take up swimming and then actually made the Olympic team in swimming.
My God.
And so now, because he was a real life U.S. Olympiad, the good old boys in San Francisco invited him into the Dolphin Club, which was very elite kind of folks, but they all had one commonality, which is their swimmers swim the San Francisco Bay. So they got him in, and now he's got connections. He was an affable guy and, had neat connections. So he ended up becoming way up in the corporatocracy of Simmons Mattress Company, did very well, won a Medal of Honor during the war because he reconfigured all the submarines, through Simmons Mattress Company. And so he had an interesting life. And there's that story actually gets a lot deeper as far as a connection that him and I had, but that's for another day. So anyway, sports, I think, you could call maybe masochistic discipline. I don't know how you look at it, but it grounds you in. I think that's the most important thing, because a lot of the things that I ended up learning later on and, doing medically, especially when I was on the conventional side, a lot of things didn't make sense. And I think when you just have that practicality and groundedness, you have a little bit more of a common sense about you. And I think that's kind of what led me into different kinds of medicine, that where all the dots seem to connect a lot better, and more important, things work on the ground.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. When you were in California for the majority of this time on the West Coast?
Yeah, I was born in San Francisco. Then, a lot of the extended family, they're all ranchers. And so I ended up out in West Marin County there, if you know Northern California at all. So it's kind of a rural area back then.
I do not, but I hear it's absolutely stunning. The majority of my Costa Rica friends that were from California were from Northern California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's real California.
That's what it sounds like. The Southern California sounds like it's all transplants. It's a lot like South Florida.
Yeah. Except for people like Mike, who actually was born and raised there.
Yep. Born and raised in the OC, baby.
OC is what? Orange County?
Orange County. Yeah, you're about your age, Topher. So I was like a 90s kid, grew up in Orange County when it was really popular. They had a movie made about it, TV show. A lot of the music that was popular on the alternative radio stations was coming out of there. It was like called third wave ska and punk. And that's kind of the scene that I grew up in. And I was actually a bit of a renegade jock. I ran varsity track, played basketball, went to an all boys Catholic high school. Like Bear, he went to a Catholic high school as well. So I came up in that sort of the idea of discipline, desire, dedication, and determination. That was our 4 Ds that we had to live by. And so I was, though, very much a renegade against the team. I would always essentially wear the things I wasn't supposed to. I was kind of a punk rock kid, so I'd have like a chain on with a lock on there. Like they're like, you can't wear that while you're at practice, and have like cut off Dickies and skate shoes. And I was a skater, so I was a street skater growing up. So that was for us the real sport that we would go play after school, which was pretty hard on the body and definitely thrashing, doing like kick flips down 4 stairs and doing rails and that kind of stuff. And that was actually why I chose the university I went to, because it had the most epic skateboarding. I chose not to go to Penn, University of Penn, and a couple other high level schools because I wanted to be by the ocean and I wanted to skate. So I went to University of California, Santa Barbara, specifically because the skating was epic.
And the fact that Santa Barbara had outrageous co-eds, I'm sure didn't have anything to do with it.
Not at all.
Nothing at all.
Yeah, UCSB, you can study buzzed. was one. University of California Southern Blondes was another one. Yeah, no, it was a great time. And actually that school is highly, highly ranked now academically. Even when I was going there, it was. But it was also kind of notorious as a party school. But yeah, no, so I came up as a street skateboarder. And that was the culture I was in. Hung out with a lot of very well-known skateboarders at that time, like Chad Muska and the whole Church of Skating crew and all those guys. And then that kind of brought me into rave culture. And that's how I discovered DJing back in the 90s. And that's actually how I met Bear's son, Bryden, through the DJ scene in Santa Barbara. And that's actually how I ended up meeting Bear.
That's awesome. You know, I give so much respect to skateboarders because that whole scene is something that I never had enough courage to do. Like I did a little bit as a young man, and I was more into bikes, so I'd try and do like my little, half pipe on my bike and stuff like that as a little kid. But the skateboarders, man, you guys are always getting wrecked, like all the time.
Wrecked, dude. I have still dents in my shins and scars everywhere from, we would go like jump over fences and go into drainage ditches in Orange County where I was growing up after high school and go bomb those and go through literally drainage tunnels, not knowing what was around the corner. And then we would go break into, always into high schools. And it was very like punk rock renegade, right? Like we would always be breaking into things to find cool stuff to skate, even though we did have some pretty epic skate parks down there as well. But yeah, it was a fun time in the 90s because you didn't have social media and cell phones and stuff. So it was like, wild times where you could get away with a lot more back then for sure, even though I was always the kid with the video camera. So in our little crew, we were actually like a sober crew. We didn't party, but we were punks. So we would go what we call wreck havoc. So we would go out at night in very boring Orange County, Southern California, which was, strip malls and very nice homes in suburbia. And we would go do pranks on people and I would film it. And we would literally, my friend Sean would dress up as a nun and we'd go into grocery stores and skate inside grocery stores. And just basically we were like renegades against this mass consumerism that had taken over. And it was our own art form, was to videotape ourselves basically driving around, and we would have high powered water guns and shoot up the Mexican gangsters and take off and like just do crazy stuff. And then for some reason I would film this illegal behavior. And then that's what sort of turned into my film. Going to college, I was a film major and I actually worked in Hollywood for 10 years off and on in the film industry. So that was sort of where it all came from.
So the statute of limitations of those videos it's over. So you can release them now, a slow bleed on Alpha Vedic, just as primers for each one of your guests. That'd be awesome.
Dude, that would be really cool. I need to go deep in the boxes and find them because they were like mini VHS, if you even remember what that was.
I do. Yeah, we used to videotape all of our practices. And when I would do coaching for kids back in the like mid 90s, I had those, and I thought I was pretty innovative because I would videotape, the slow motion of somebody through their field goal biomechanics and everything like that. And I really loved those little tapes. I had a Sony recorder that
that's what I had.
I had to put a bunch of miles on, so I know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah, I would actually edit VCR to VCR. So we would make skate videos and I would just use 2 VCRs, stop, record, and then I'd fast forward, stop, record. And that's how we would make our skate vids back then.
That's awesome.
And none of those things had been invented yet when I was a kid.
No.
Yeah, right? No. Remember this.
And the phone was one of these,
Well,
with the big dial. And
I talk a lot about this with other people, and I like to hear your guys' opinion, is actually being like a multi-sport, multipolar athlete. And like as a scout, like that was something that we always looked for, we looked for the person that played multiple different sports. Because I really think I know different sports work different aspects of your mind, like different skill sets. And so where were you guys with that? Like, I think that's one of the blessings of not being in the over filmed world. Like when we were coming up, like you actually got a break from actually always thinking and seeing yourself.
Yeah.
I think there's a stress that youngins have to always be seeing themselves. And like when you would go to a different sport and be with different friends doing different things, I think that's just so good for the soul, the body, the soul, the mind. Like,
Sports were different too. And I don't want to sound like an old fart just talking about the good old days, but I think there was something to that. Um, like in high school now, kids are going to all these camps and working on, advanced techniques, and it's just all, academic almost. And, they're turning out athletes at younger ages, but I think it maybe robs the kids of some of the joy of just the sport. When we're in high school, we're just all of our buddies, went to school together. Some of us went out for football just for the fun of it. My high school quarterback was Dan Fouts, who became
nice.
all pro, all everything, Hall of Famer. But we grew up together, and Danny would just be in the huddle, and we're drawing little X's and O's and little things in the dirt in the huddle, and saying, you go over there by the whatever, and do this, because I was a tight end and a defensive end in high school, went both ways. And so we just kind of winged it. We had a good program, and you had coaches and everything, but they kind of let kids just be kids and play sports. So in high school and grammar school is great because Catholic school, we have CYO basketball. So we got to play organized basketball for, early years. But I think it was more just for the fun of it. I did it because I just always had a ball of some type in my hands. And that's just what gave me the best joy. My heroes were all sports heroes. Baseball was my best and my most fun sport for me. Willie Mays was my hero growing up, and it's just a time where there's a lot of innocence. I think, just doing stuff for the love of the game, as they say. So, that's all changed. It's gotten kind of serious and more formalized. And when I'm seeing these things on YouTube where you have these high school kids going to all these camps and trying to be professionals, when they're 14 years old, and I'm like, just let the kids be kids. I have one little theory about sports, and this last thing I'll say is, I really believe the downhill shift in our country came when the national pastime shifted from baseball to football. It became this, and I believe it was by design to bring us into this more of a militaristic, when I went to football, I always had a love-hate thing with football. I liked it, but then the higher up I went, it just became more like work. And it also had this kind of militaristic aspect to it. And, baseball was just, look at some old films of baseball games back in the day, and the people are up in the stands or visiting. It's like a big group picnic. They're all dressed nice. And, it was just very refined and much more civil, and now you've got, fat guys, without shirts on, painting their bodies and getting in fights up in the stands, so things have changed, and I don't know if it's for the better or not. I think we'll do better as a country when we shift back to baseball as a natural pastime.
I would like to see the national pastime sport become surfing. Because
there you go. I'd be down for
living,
that.
like living in Costa Rica, the little bit that I ever surfed, I was like completely addicted to it. So I decided not to do it because I wouldn't be able to be a productive individual. But surfing, like the surfing culture, the way just always being in the water, having that connection, you have to be a good athlete. You have to be aware. You have to be alert. You're connected. Like how can you not be connected when you're in that, And so, I mean, it's kind of cool down in Costa Rica because like a lot of my friends' kids and even my friends are avid surfers, and like the whole vibe of that community is just so, it's so on point, because especially the kids, they want to perform well, but they're always just performing against themselves. You know, there might be somebody else out there and stuff like that, but like, it's an internal thing that appears external. And it's such a beautiful thing to see. I love seeing the young men come up in that, and even the young women come up in that, and they're like awesome
Yeah.
athletes. They get banged up, but like in a different way. They're not getting banged up with violence, with you smashing into somebody. That would be really awesome to see that.
Yeah, that would be amazing. When I was
Yeah.
going to school, I think we were the number one surfing school, or number one surfing. Yeah, UC Santa Barbara at that time, because that's that they do that. They do the competitions in Division I surfing. And so I was with, all my friends were surfers, and I was a skater, and I recently got into surfing, and I'm addicted to it right now. So I feel you on that. But just to go back to Bear's point real quick, do you remember the George Carlin bit, the famous bit about football versus baseball? And football is you're on the gridiron and it's war. And then baseball is like, I have to get home. I want to get home. And 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 it's basically like a really funny back and forth between, like the war element of football. You're on the line. It's impact. It's like I got to get down the gridiron and all that. And when baseball, it's very geometrical, and you're on a diamond, and you're out. When I was a kid, I remember just like counting the flowers out there, and it was very peaceful. But there's something to be said about the sort of the nature and the vibe and the feeling of baseball, which is to me my favorite sport as well, even though I was a hardcore basketball fan growing up in the 90s Jordan era, and played ball all the way into college. Actually almost walked on at UCSB as a basketball player. But that being said, there is something really poignant about that, Bear, that we went from baseball to football, because if you look at the culture now, it's quick bursts of activity and concentration on something, right? Like the TikTok, I only have 10 seconds of awareness and then I got to move on. Where baseball, to sit down and watch a baseball game, you have to be able to take it easy, take a breath, see where the strategy is playing, like what's going on the long term, right? The long term narrative, and it's not so high impact right now. Give it to me, kind of
And those
thing.
guys are
So
good athletes. Those guys are good athletes.
baseball players.
When I was in high school, I was invited to play in this summer league that was called the Joe DiMaggio League in Northern California. It's all like handful of high school all stars, and then they also had guys that were playing farm teams, pro and everything. So I got to, the Giants sponsored us, so we had Giant hand-me-down uniforms. I had Willie Mays, as I made sure I had his uniform, and before the names on the back, they're just like wool and little embroidered things. So I had Willie Mays right there, number 24, and but it was, I look forward to baseball practice, really anticipated the season. Football two-a-days, looking forward to those, no effing way, I hated it. And, the surfing thing, what's great about surfing, when you get into that community, the criteria for the best surfer amongst hardcore surfers is the guy that's having the most fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And the epitome of surfing is when you're a grommet, brand new, just learning it, because you're just stoked. If you get the bug, it's unbelievable. And so the goal of every surfer is to remain a grommet forever, just to have that new fresh perspective and just enjoy it every time you go out.
I surfed
my kids on surfboards when they're like about 5-6 years old, and I didn't. Well, we homeschooled them so they couldn't play football, but I definitely got them away from all that stuff.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm pretty new at it. I don't know why. I mean, I grew up on the beach, bodyboarding and all that stuff, but I never got on a surfboard, just because for me it was very competitive down south. Like there was always 30 guys in the lineup. If you were a kook at all, it wasn't fun, right? So up here, it's gnarly. Like the water's 45 degrees. You got to be pretty hardcore to surf up here. So the community is really cool. Like if you're gonna have the balls to come out and do that, you're awesome, especially if you live here. So anyways, long story short, like Bear's kids have been surfing since they were 5. So now Bryden, his son, who's one of my best friends, is so stoked I'm surfing. He's like, finally, it only took you 30 years. But that being said, like I'm still at that Grom phase. So last week before I left for this backpacking trip, I went out there. Wasn't even great waves. They're like 2 to 3 foot, pretty cold, but I'm so in love with it that I was out there for 3.5 hours. It got super blown out. I didn't care. People coming in and out. They're like, "You're still out there, dude." I'm like, and I'm just loving it because I'm catching waves now and I'm actually riding the face and doing cutbacks and stuff. And I'm just right now, I'm on that little kid vibe on the wave, man. I'm just so happy out there.
That's awesome. Like for me with sports growing up, sports was a wonderful catharsis. Like I always gravitated towards sports. Like I was a very good soccer player, very good tennis player. And I only got into football because I was a kicker. Like I played football in middle school just because my soccer coach was like, "You're going to go kick for the football team." And I was like, "Oh no, I want to be a cheerleader so I can, be close to Vanessa." And he's like, "No, no, no, you play football, you'll be close to Vanessa. No problem." And so like for me, tennis, I love tennis. I grew up in a tennis family and I love
Great
soccer.
sport.
And soccer was like the real football. Those were the two sports that were for somebody my size those were the perfect sports to play.
Soccer's a little communistic though, don't you think?
I don't know. When I was playing, it wasn't so like
I'm just kidding you.
oh, okay. Like yeah, like when we were playing, it was like everything was like we would watch a Soccer Made in Germany. It was like
Right.
a very, very it was before everybody started taking dives. In fact, you had a lot of
Yeah.
pride with never like my pride that I had, I wasn't the fastest, but I was very strong and I had incredible balance. And so nobody could take me down. And that was something I had pride with. Now today, everybody just flops and is like,
It's so bad.
acts like a dead fish on the ground. But
Yeah, I was in competitive soccer league team for 8 years, travel team. Fullback. I took pride that no one scored on me for like 5 years. And I was the king of slide tackling.
nice.
And yeah, and because I was fast, so I could slide tackle. And yeah, back then like nobody bailed. And then it's gotten so bad that I can't even watch professional soccer. And I think what we're looking at right now is like just how bad the commercialization and industrialization of sports is. To Bear's point about kids not having fun anymore. And you have this sort of centralization and corporatization of it. And it kind of goes to the boardroom, right? Into this like need for infinite growth, like the infinite growth model of having to get better and better numbers right on the field. And there is something really cool about that when you look at how sort of the evolution of man with sport and how we've gotten better and better at like running a 400 and and lifting more weights and all that. But when it's turned into a commercialized sport with professional sports, it demeans it and it takes away from it. And I think we're at a sort of a pivotal point where that's all ending. I really think that if you look at like the numbers with the NFL and well, obviously them going all woke and doing all that political nonsense, but dude, I don't watch professional sports at all. I watch pro surfing. I do watch pro surfing now, and occasionally, geez, that's about it, man. I'm trying to think what else I watched, dude. I stopped watching the NFL maybe 5 years ago, definitely pre-COVID. I was getting already tired of it. I stopped watching basketball. I was a Lakers fan my whole life. As soon as they put the fake fans in during COVID and all that, I was like, I'm done. Never watching NBA again. I was a hardcore Los Angeles, always be Anaheim Angels to me. It's where I grew up. I grew up going to those games. Loved going to baseball games as a kid. It's such like a great memory of mine. Haven't watched an Angels game in 4 years. Used to have the MLB package. Used to do fantasy football. All that's gone out of my life now. And I've realized that was just all soap opera. It's like baby man soap opera nonsense, right? So there's sports and there's like athletics, right? There's like doing the athletics yourself. And like my kids do athletics. But then this idea of professional sports, it's like, I don't know if that's the end game anymore that you really want for your children because it's so nonsensical now. It's so ridiculous. Unless you're like Novak or the professional tennis player who's just crushing it and not getting jabbed. That's really admirable and amazing, but there's not many pro athletes anymore like the Willie Mays or Mickey Mantles that I would look up to anymore.
Yeah, I think oh, I'm sorry.
No, please.
I think we've been incentivized in the wrong direction. I noticed that in the last locker room I was ever in the Arena Football League. We were all young men in our early 20s. We were all starting our own businesses. We were entrepreneurial. And we weren't that good of a team, but we could say we were professional athletes. I mean, we were being paid to play football. And it was really interesting because the last time I was just in that locker room, and we were all from different I can't even say the word, ethnic backgrounds. And one thing I noticed that we all did have in common, other than being high performers, was that we were all injured. And when I noticed that we were all injured, I had this epiphany. I was like, oh, we've been incentivized to kill each other. Like we're getting paid very well to, apparently play with this pigskin. But the real truth of the matter is this is the meat grinder. And as long as we're in this meat grinder, we're not the competition for the people that set the program up, And I immediately went into yoga.
Yeah, right.
I was like, I'm going to move to India and be a yogi and totally defrag from this whole system. So
you went from gladiator to yogi. I love it.
Dude, I've met so many people. I've met to this day, I have like 4 of my best friends are professional athletes. 2 of them were pro basketball players. Another was pro football player. And we all had a similar break from the machine, because we all came up in the 90s and it was everything was incentivized very heavily towards essentially just wrecking your body completely. And then we all just kind of were like, no. And like, none of our families could understand why we rejected it so hard and we didn't pursue it. And it was just like, no, there is no more love in this. This is not a joyful thing. Like, I love going out to a field and just kicking with my guys, but do I look forward to getting, my ass chewed out by a coach that thinks he's God's gift? No, like it was horrible.
And the first thing the coach asks you when you go down is, are you hurt or are you injured? So yeah.
Yeah, like playing in like a stupid bowl game, I ripped my sartorius in my right kicking leg, and they shot me up with Toradol to kick in a bowl game that meant nothing. Like that and I saw this over and over and over again. And so for me, I'm just like, if the whole thing falls and crumbles tomorrow, great. Because then
You're like in the Lay's Fritos bowl or something, and
we were in the Pullian Weed Eater Bowl.
I've never heard of that.
Weed Eater Bowl against LSU. Like, are you kidding me? This bowl, like we were like a 7-4 team or something, and they were.
And what college team did you play for?
I played for Michigan State.
And
wow.
what years were those?
94 through 97. I was the starting kicker for Nick. George Perlis was the coach that recruited me, and then Nick Saban was my coach for the last 3 years I was there.
The Spartans.
Yeah, Big Ten. That's big time.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. Like it was like I went there because we got to play Notre Dame, and I was very bitter that Notre Dame. They had me come up to their camps. They said that they loved me as a kicker, but I wasn't rated top 3 in the nation, so I could walk on. And I was like, I'm going to go to a school and play you every year.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that was my revenge tour, which I did very well against them. I think
my dream was to go to Notre Dame. And I got in and I went to go do the campus walkthrough. And I was like, dude, there's nothing to do here but like get drunk with girls in the cornfields or something. And I was like, and the skating sucks. So I passed on it. But I grew up a huge Notre Dame football fan. I even met Rudy. He came to our school in high school. And so it's like, That's funny though. So you guys beat Notre Dame?
No, well, we beat them my senior year,
Mhm.
and we beat them my junior year. We lost to them my freshman year, but we only lost to them by 1 point my freshman year. They had won the national championship, I think in '93. They beat Florida
Mhm.
State. And so we played them in '94. That was my freshman year, and I had 3 field goals against them in the first half. So I remember it was my second
Wow.
game, and I was running along the sideline, and I was like, put my arms up like this to Lou Holtz, like I was like, "Yeah, you missed out on me," because they had a terrible kicking game. And yeah, so I got my due revenge against Lou
Got your
Holtz.
licks in.
Yeah, yeah. So you guys, I like talking to realized men about initiation, because there's something about the initiation, going through the fire of an unwinnable situation. And that's something that I think is one really good thing that athletics actually puts you in. It puts you in, unless like you're the top of the top and you play for the best of the best and you've never lost and you've never, all of us, like the three of us, we have been put in situations where it was an insurmountable thing and we lost, and we had to face it, and then we had to grow and get better from it. And I would just like to hear if you remember that situation, or if there were multiple situations where you got through that male initiatory experience.
Oh man. Bear, I have a few.
Mike. I was just going to defer to you, Mike.
I know it's a very broad question, but I think it's so.
Dude.
No, it's a
We
good
were
question.
I have one. Yeah, so going to an all boys Catholic high school, like definitely every day seemed like an initiation in many ways. And having to dealing with the hazing and dealing with just all that goes along with that. But we were playing Modern Day, which I don't know if you've heard of that team. They're
Yep.
like #1 ranked team every year, and they were our rival growing. So that was like our high school rival. We were the all boys Catholic high school called Servite. And actually in the 80s, we were 60s and 70s, we were dominated in football. And in the 80s, we had a couple good years. Like Mike Witt went to our school, who's played MLB baseball player. And then we had a bunch of like really good football players. Oh God, what's his name? He was the quarterback at Notre Dame. Berline, right? Steve Berline, Servite. Anyways, so I'm on the basketball team playing Modern Day. We're coming down to the end. We have a chance to beat them, and there's a technical foul, and so there's I was the best free throw shooter on the team, and this was to take the lead going into the half, and they said, "Winner, go take it." For some reason, I don't know what happened. My knees gave out. Everyone's cheering, and I like messed up, and I airballed it.
Oh.
I airballed it, and I like I blacked out or something, and I just remember being so shattered, like my entire life was over. And then the coach ripped on me, and like it was pretty gnarly, and like I felt like I don't know how I'd ever get over this, and I just felt so defeated, and like I let my team down, and I was just ruined. And it took me a while to really, and as a young, I think I was a sophomore, so I was what 16, not even 15. So yeah, that was like definitely something in sports where you going through something like that, man, it took a lot of character building to get over that. And then of course later, and I think it was the next game or the game after that, I hit a game winning free throw. So the ups and downs of sports and building character, I do believe in the 20th century, sports played a major role as the coming of age thing for boys in the West, right? Because we didn't have sort of what the indigenous cultures have with the bullet ants, putting your hand in, or going out in the desert for 4 days by yourself. I think sports played that, was that teacher for men for us, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was definitely a rites of passage for myself. You know, all the sports, but I think football on that side of things did have an element that was a little a different dimension from other sports in that it was you were called on for more rigorous kind of combat.
Mhm.
And depending on the position you're at, you could get exposed in public. And I think my biggest fear in sports was embarrassing myself, especially when I used to fight, because you're the only one in a ring. And the worst thing to a male ego, at least mine, was to get beat in front of people. And then and then if you didn't have a great showing, you just had to get over it and uh do it again and just rise to the occasion. And times like that, when you did pull it off and you redeemed yourself for something maybe you didn't do so well the last time, there is a greatest sense of accomplishment in that.
Mhm.
And another thing I'll say about football is, as much as there's things I don't like about it, there was a sort of a unity in the team that was unique compared to other sports. And a very positive thing back in the day, which sports has, especially NFL, NBA, maybe them even more so, have ruined, is the unity between people from different cultures, different races, and so forth. So when I played, maybe a third of the guys were white guys, and the rest were like Tongans and blacks from East LA and wherever. And we all got along, and it was a true melting pot in that we you didn't think about race. I mean, we didn't anyway because we're athletes,
Mhm.
but you really get another level even beyond differences. When you play on a team with people, you're all, and back then it was just kind of like just being with the guys. So you could make jokes about anybody and not be
Yep.
called out for being a racist or something. And both sides gave it back and forth, and we had a blast. And so, and to this day, I've got, lifelong friends that are from all over the place, different backgrounds. And, we just don't see that thing. And even a lot of my old buddies, black guys that, are looking at what's going on right now, they're shaking their heads because, again, from our era, sports was the best place to put all that behind you. And it was never an issue where I grew up in Northern California in the first place. But now it's all been politicized, and I see NFL and college teams where they're all just, um, just blowing smoke up people just because they're of a different skin color or something, or walking on eggshells, and it's like bullshit. And again, the people I used to play with, we all called BS on that, because that the whole point of sports was to not get into all that stuff. So that's a little bit divergent from your question, sorry, but I think that was a positive aspect back when I played. And just the fact that especially at a very high level, not just that you had to perform, but you had to do a gut check quite a bit when you're out in the middle, like at Utah State, we had 3-a-days.
Oof.
And so it was arduous, and you had off winter training, you had spring ball, it just never stopped. You're a professional athlete.
Mhm.
And there's my position my last couple of years is defensive end. We played good teams, Nebraska, Oklahoma, although like when we played Oklahoma, when Barry Schweitzer was still the head coach back then, we played them when they won the national championship. And even though we were ranked, that was, the one game we lost. We played Texas that year. But with Oklahoma, for instance, they have all these speedy backs. Back then, they had one by the name of Greg Pruitt. I think he ended up being all whatever.
Mhm.
Nebraska, Johnny Rogers, guys like that. And my job was to, turn those guys in. And here you have
Yeah.
these little
Keep
speedsters.
contained. Keep
So,
contained.
and if you don't do your job, those guys are like around you in 2 seconds, and everybody knows that you effed up. So, there you just kind of went in with a little bit of tension and knowing that you had to, and like for instance, in that same Oklahoma game, it's 114 degrees on the field. It's one of the first Norman there's one of the first teams that had the artificial turf, which got even hotter. And so, by fourth quarter, you're doing a gut check. There's a lot on the line, and you're just a kid. It's on television. So I think it was kind of cool, to be in that kind of situation. And I sort of looked at it with excitement myself.
Yes. Well, I think you like actually you went to school when school actually meant something. Mike and I went to school when I don't know what I mean, you learned how to do film, but my finance degree was worthless. The
Dude,
best
I was a film theory dude. I barely learned how to do. We got to do 2 production classes. It was like I learned film when I actually went and worked in Hollywood. Like, dude, it was a joke, man. It was a total joke. I remember getting in arguments with my professors all the time because I was seen as racist and like chauvinistic because I came from an era in Orange County where we just called it like we saw it, and
Yeah.
I didn't understand the liberal mindset because it was very conservative where I came from. I got in a lot of arguments with my professors. And that's where I rebelled against it. And I started throwing raves and barely went to school because I was just like, this is nonsense, dude.
You were an entrepreneur. That's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
there's that, because the one thing I learned, because you'll like this, Mike, because when I was in college, being in Michigan, the music scene was horrid. Like it was so bad. And I was Fort Lauderdale, Miami kid. So I'm bringing up all this great beats music, like DJ Icy, like all this
Yeah.
good stuff from South Florida, because I love the South Florida rave scene.
Yep.
So I would come up to Michigan.
Miami bass and all that stuff.
Yeah. I was like thinking I was going to be well, I wasn't thinking. I was essentially acting like a producer, because I would schedule DJs to come in, and then I, with my football contacts, would get all the girls to go to the raves.
Nice.
So like I feel like at least in East Lansing and Lansing, Michigan, from 95 to 98, like that was my jam, was bringing in all this music from the East Coast to Michigan. And we just had a blast, because that was actually one of the first times I ever felt the unity that a whole crowd could have in a good way. I had felt that in football stadiums. Like I could feel like when a stadium would erupt with joy or get upset or whatever, but like it was almost like a huge like Michael Jackson video. Like there would be certain rave sets where the DJ was just hitting so perfectly, and all of us would end up just be in like the same cut doing the same thing,
Yep.
without it being choreographed. It was
Yep.
just like whatever the vibe was just so awesome that everybody was kind of sharing the same vibe. It
Yeah.
was
That's
so
why I
good.
wanted to be a DJ. As I went to my first rave when I was a freshman in high school, ended up being one of my best buddies, was playing house music across the hall. As a freshman in the dorms, I was a punk rock ska kid, never heard of that music before. I mean, I knew disco and stuff from my parents' vinyl, but I didn't know what this like bumping house music was, like I've heard of Daft Punk and stuff, but anyways, like I fell immediately in love with it. And I said, I want to do what you do. Cause I went to a rave and I saw the DJ up there, and it had that sort of that resonance going through where he was like the maestro leading the whole symphony of the crowd dancing together. And I was like, I want to be that guy. So I just became a DJ nerd. I would go to sober to these huge SoCal raves, 30,000 kids up in the mountains is wild. Undergrounds, 30,000 people. And I got to know all the DJs, and I started throwing, and then my friend who was a DJ had a crew in Oakland, and we started throwing ourselves 10, 15, 20,000 person raves underground at home base in Oakland, and started bringing in all the big DJs from back East, all the famous ones. We brought DJ Bone in from Detroit. You had some great, obviously classic famous DJs out of Detroit. That's where techno came from. But yeah, so that was the culture I grew up in out of college, and then started throwing my own parties and doing my own events for years. That's how I met my wife, and I was basically a professional DJ. That's how I paid my rent in the bar scene in Santa Barbara, and then in touring as a DJ. But yeah, there's no better feeling than being ahead of the game, like knowing 6 tracks ahead of what I'm playing, and like, I got you. I got this crowd. I got this dance floor. That you are mine. I own you. And I'm going to take you on an adventure right now that is going to blow your mind. And that to me is my addiction. That's why I will never quit DJing.
So there,
And it's go
Yeah,
ahead.
go
Barry.
ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, there's that element in sports too. I always considered it an art form. Your instrument obviously is your own body, but you have to be in it. You can't be in your head. And there are those very special moments when the whole team was on the same, just for some, cosmic reason, all at the same time. You're all just there. I remember we had a game against Mississippi and we were favored, but it went down to the wire and we were behind, no time left on the clock. And the other defensive end, blocked a punt and then we fell on it in the end zone, no time. And, but it was just like one of those things. And I remember many times where just into that zone, as everybody talks about, and the whole team's there at the same exact moment. You don't know how the hell you did it, but you did it. And I think that's when you get into the music scene too, you're tapping in to those patterns, we'll say, and whether you're playing a musical instrument or using your body, or if you're a DJ, you get in that kind of similar flow of things, which is why to this day I still love being involved in all those things. And even though I was never a musician or a DJ, music also has been a big part of my life. Growing up in the 60s in Northern California, we just had amazing music. And
Primo.
a lot of my clients over the years were very well known, in the music business. And yeah,
Well, and
music,
some of your friends too, Barry, that you grew up with, pretty legendary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all
Well,
sorts of names we could start dropping just because, we're in that particular area of the world
Yeah.
where everybody was going to where I grew up, for the scene as it was unfolding there. And then when I decided to quit football after college, I went to work because I started fighting and doing stuff. So I worked security, like personal bodyguard kind of stuff for a lot of major rock bands. I worked for a promoter that, did all these major events with all the big names in the rock industry at the time. So I got to know all those guys or a lot of them, and, spend time with them and learn about their drug habits and everything. So
I will say,
Mhm.
hearing Bear's stories from the 60s, just I could listen to his stories for forever. I mean, it's such a crazy, awesome time. But yeah, there's a transcendental concept we're touching on here, right? About being in this flow state, the zone, the alpha waves, or whatever it is. And I'm the more that I'm sort of looking into my spiritual self and who I am, and understanding that my thoughts aren't me, right? My thoughts aren't me, but you get those little moments in your life, like I just had in the wilderness, where you get a touch of who you really are, who your higher self or your eternal being. And I think in sports, you get little witnesses to that every now and then. Like as Bear said, it's when you stop, you get out of your head and you just be. And there are moments in DJing where I don't even remember my set, where it was like a glimpse into the unknown and into the eternal, where it was just there and that thing happening. And I think those are the special times that the ancients knew about, and that the indigenous cultures understood, by putting yourself through crazy amounts of stress and pressure, and fasting and doing all these things, cold temperature, whatever, to have that glimpse of the eternal self.
Yeah, I would have to say all high performers kind of go through that quandary of you're in the zone, you have spontaneous genius, and you weren't responsible for it.
Yeah.
It happens through you. You don't do it. If you're there doing it, it's good. But when you're not there and it's happening, whoa, is it perfect? And that's what brought me towards like spirituality. Was I would have these moments where, like, why is it when I'm involved, like when I think I'm involved, I don't hit it. But when I'm not involved, when it just happens and it's there, it's perfect. Like, what is this? That was ended up being like the primer for my exploration into consciousness. Is like, what is this thing? Like, what is this witnessing awareness? What is this fourth wall that when perfection occurs, the only thing that's there is the fourth wall. But when I'm sitting there thinking and I have my own will and my own thoughts and my own fears or whatever, that perfection it can never be met. It just doesn't happen. It's a very interesting quandary that most high performers that I've spoken to go through. And I think a lot of depression that professional athletes end up having after their careers is that they don't have enough of a challenge in their life to create the requisite stress and neurochemicals and all the rest of it to actually be the catalyst into the zone. So they pick up some bullshit like golf or whatever, and it just doesn't do it, or they'll become a gambling addict, or they'll do all these other things that are creating an artificial stress to prime the pump, just for that searching for the requisite chemistry to put them in the zone again. Has that been your guys' experience?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when I had a few years down Santa Barbara, about 20 years ago or something. And a guy who played for the Bears approached me. He was turned full on yogi, and he was a linebacker for Chicago. And he approached me because he wanted me to help him design a program for ex-NFLers all around yoga. And the reason is because so many professional athletes had such a difficult time in that transition. And I could tell you countless people I know that I played with, guys who are all pro, you know, some well-known folks out there that are all struggling to this day, and they're my age now, and just never found themselves after sports. And I think what you're talking about is very real, you know, when you just can't duplicate that intensity in your own life and that satisfaction that you get from that. It's you know, you have to transition into something, otherwise you're going to be lost. And once you get the hang of it with what you're describing, it's even more satisfying when you're able to tap into those moments and realize there's something else happening. It's more satisfying than even having your ego take credit for, you know, whatever you're doing. And so
Right.
that becomes, and what I like about martial arts is that it fosters more of that from the get-go. You know, it's just like, no, you're tapping in, you're not using your body, and then you're just letting things flow through you. The healing arts are the same. You know, I did a lot of academics, and the goal of academics is to have that back here somewhere. So, and you know it so well that it's just automatic, but all you're doing is developing a vocabulary that spirit can communicate through.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm practicing medicine the way I've always done it, it's really more of an art form.
Mm-hmm.
You know, folks, I saw thousands of folks over the years, and they'd come in and, well, what do you think, doc? And even though I could, in the conventional side, give a pat answer, oh, it's this, that, my favorite answer was, I haven't got a clue. But when I got my hands under the hood there, and was able to look on all the different dimensions of somebody, you know, the different dimensions of their anatomy, physiology, and also their subtle anatomy. And when those tools are there to work on any one of those levels, and then you get in that zone, then it just all becomes apparent as far as what little sequence of modalities you have to employ, you know, in order to address the unique bio-individuality of that particular person. And you can't do it with your brain, because your brain is not possible, no matter how trained you are. It's impossible for you to outsmart somebody else's body that's a product of not just this lifetime experience, but who knows what they dragged into this lifetime with them. And there's all this stuff going on that's, you know, stimulating all these physiological events. And, you know, you have to just, again, like an artist, unless you're a paint by the numbers kind of guy, which is what the AMA is about right now, what you're supposed to do is just go, and you don't know what your next step is until you take it. Same thing on the athletic field. You aren't planning, where you're going to make your next cut or whatever. You just have to go with it and, develop that kind of trust in your ability to tune in. So that's, I think, what kept me in the healing arts for so long is it helped me grow personally that way, and then also use that other side of myself. And I don't think, no matter how much academic training I did, I don't think I could have put it together in a useful a manner if I didn't play sports, and then especially really deep dive into the martial arts.
So we all have incredible proprioception. So think about it. Mike, with the music, like the electronic music, the skateboarding, the surfing, Bear with all the sports and the music you were into, me with my own path. There's something I've noticed with healers in general, is that healers have incredible proprioception. And there is like this, I've been told by people that I have really good instincts or intuition. And I'm like, no, I just think I'm hyper alert. Like, I think I have, from all my different conditioning, I just have this, like, I have a hyper observance that I can tap into. That's all I think actual intuition is. Nobody's given me what intuition actually is yet to actually satiate me in a sense where I could say, oh yeah, that's intuition. I just think people that have a really good proprioception, people that are fully embodied and use all their faculties at a very high level, have the capacity to actually, in any moment where you're creating a loop current with a lover, with a client, with a friend, whatever, that loop current, all that stuff that you've used in your own embodiment now is within the cell, within the circuit of the two of you. And you can tap into that, and you can feel the variance. You can feel the different,
an increased capacity, like an increased capacitance for that loop, as your ability to engage and then increase that over and over because you're open to it.
Yeah, and it's not always an increase. Sometimes you'll get into a circuit with somebody and it will be like, oh, whoa, what's happening here? Powering down. So, but would you say that that's been consistent for you two also? Like how I'm describing that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
every time I'm around Bear, I it's funny, especially when you get like guys like us together, man, just like in person, the time disappears. And it's like, I go up to the farm and I'm like, I'm just coming by for a couple hours. I got to do this. And like 8 hours go by and we have like insane conversations and stuff. And it's like, we don't have enough time because of that, what you're explaining right there, right? And it's just like there's definitely uniqueness when it comes to, I think, someone who's engaged with these types of experiences in their lives and has essentially opened up their consciousness with their body. It's very important, right? That body aspect, in ways that allow them to have the ability to tap in to others very easily. And so Bear hasn't really mentioned this about his life, but he was also a professional firefighter. And I am a volunteer firefighter, and we've done some recent casts about firefighting because we were evacuated and we almost lost the farm in my house to wildfire this summer. Sorry, and that was one aspect that I've realized going on calls that through all my life's experiences have helped me, is that I can intuitively kind of feel out, without any training. We do our weekly training, but I didn't have the kind of training Bear has to know what to do with patients and victims and stuff on these kind of really gnarly calls. So, and that's just another jumping into the fire. Like, I think people like us, we seek discomfort, and we, because of our background in sports and everything we've done, because of that discomfort with the comfort, if you will, right? Like, with the modern comforts, that's why you were in the jungles of Costa Rica, and look where, and like, doing things where you're building in ways that people typically don't, and challenging yourself. And the way what Bear's done, taking on the, all new routes of alternative medicine that nobody has really done before, and myself doing events that people said were impossible to do during the height of COVID. It's that sort of innovation and outside the box thinking that I think is what drives culture forward. And it's culture that people don't even realize is happening yet. It's the kind of people like us, not to toot our horns too much, but I think it's pretty cool. Like we're very lucky and fortunate to be here doing what we do because of our background growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike and I are partners in a business also, but the business is fueled by the passion of within a larger context. And we've been at it for a lot of years now. And we've done everything completely non-conventional, from what you might have learned in college as far as how to start a business. And one thing is it was fueled by passion. So Mike and I and our other partners have all been putting in tons of sweat equity rather
Nice.
than running out and getting somebody with a pile of money just to finance us from the start and, do it, more the way people do businesses. We did it more old school.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way we could have gotten through these years and achieved what we've achieved as a company unless, we had a passion behind what we were doing, unless there was a purpose behind the company in the first place, other than just selling widgets. And then also, when times were more challenging or, different issues came up, we just all kind of stuck with it. And because of that higher goal, it just got us to the next level to where the real magic starts happening. And in hindsight now, even though when we started, we thought that certain things would happen on a certain timetable. Now, all these years later, we see that things are happening at a perfect level of divine timing, and our message is now ready to be received. And also people need, this creation of our company and, what it represents more than ever. And also because of the hard financial times that this country and the whole world is now going into, and we ain't seen nothing yet. Because of the way we've built it old school, we have certain infrastructure, lack of debt, and all those sorts of things where we can still be standing on the other end of whatever kind of economic cataclysm and just start up again or continue through it or whatever. So, again, it's everything, whether it's business or sports or medicine. It's just been over intellectualized and standardized to the point where people don't think on their feet anymore. They've never developed the knack of just having the fun of not knowing what's going to happen next, which is the greatest joy I have, is being held in suspense about everything. I mean, who wants to know what's going to happen?
Well,
So
haven't
yeah,
you noticed like the psychopath and the sociopath needs control? In
yeah,
every real living man that you've ever met, living being that you've ever met is
because
okay
they're
to get,
afraid.
exactly, exactly. But every living person, like really living, a man or woman in good standing, hey man, I'm gonna give it the good old college try. What's gonna happen? I don't know.
I
Like
think
that,
that's why we come here to begin with, because this
right?
place allows us to have that experience.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off. It's just like I just noticed all the most miserable people I know, they're all control freaks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dude, I just fully rolled the dice and took my kids on an insane wilderness adventure backpacking the last 3 days in the Oregon wilderness with I kind of looked at the weather and I was like, oh man, there could be a pretty gnarly storm coming. Dude, like a full-on winter storm came, 13 hours torrential downpour, and that got down to the 30s. And here I am with my two sons out in 74. We were like 6,800 elevation in these, it's called in these lakes in the mountains of the Siskiyou Mountains. and literally went into a survival situation. I had to get fire going after a 11-mile hike. We were all soaked, and the sun was going down, and it was raining, and I had to like build structures and get fire, and my kids were helping me. And like, that was maybe the X-gener in me. Like, I didn't, probably the millennials would have been hyper using every app known to man to make sure not to do that, you know. But me, I just looked at some old school maps and like checked some weather online. I'm like, it could get a little hairy, but let's roll the dice and do it. And guess what? Yes, it was a little hairy, but it was epic. And they'll be telling their grandkids about it.
Definitely.
And they grew as men and as young men. And I think it was one of those coming of age things that a lot of kids don't get to go through anymore because of the pussification of the modern man, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you've definitely, what's the saying from Fight Club? I don't want to die without any scars. I mean,
I really believe wealth is the true banking is banking the memories. You know, we talked about this on our last Alpha Cast. Like, obviously, wealth is not rich. And I've heard you say that before too, Topher. Like, being rich is not wealthy. Wealthy is about, you know, what you put out in the world. It's a qualitative measurement. And it's measured in the friends you have, the loved ones you have, and the overall supportive community. But also, I believe in the memories you bank. And in this short time we're here, we really ramped up some amazing memories over the last 3 days, and I feel wealthier than ever. And I think the millennial class has been hoodwinked a little bit into going all in on that, and thinking it's just that without having the grounding discipline. But they do, I gotta say, got a little bit. They're back in that a little bit, because a lot of millennials and actually the younger generation really do get that. Like, they're out living their lives in that way and don't own anything. There is a balance there. And alas, I'll just end with the balance idea of the elements. Like, here we are, like a month ago, about to be burnt out by fire, and fire was out of balance and wrecking our beautiful countryside in a way that was probably meant to, but also not. It was obviously generated fires, and that's a whole other story. But here I am now with the opposite, where now it's like too much water is coming down, and now I need fire to literally survive. And it was about bringing the balance back. And that was the sort of the lesson I was reminded about this last 3 days, is about the importance of being in balance at all times. That is where true health and happiness comes from. And so here I am, just got done fighting fires, and now I'm just praying I can get this fire started so that I can warm our clothes and not freeze to death tonight. And actually have burned my thumb totally, because I got to the point where I just like literally turned my lighter on and had a little duff ball, and I just kept it lighting and burning my thumb until I could get enough fire to get onto the tinder to get it lit. It took me an hour and a half to get this damn fire started. But yeah, it was just a great reminder about the elements, and how when they're in balance really is when we're super tapped into the natural world and how it's meant to be.
mm-hmm.
And our whole purpose is to masterfully learn how to manipulate those elements in a way that is conducive with the laws of nature.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, then, you know, we create beauty. We have healthy bodies. We have harmonious relationships. And there are a certain, for whatever reason, number of misguided folks on this plane that are purposely isolating, like, for instance, the fire element in order to destroy,
Mm-hmm.
or using the water element in the same way, or poisoning the air element, you know, take your pick. But it's all about balance. And those elements, we have to remember also, is a living consciousness. They're actually elementals, which are sentient beings that are no less sentient or individualized than all of us here. And their job is to follow our dictates in as far as our ability to create and be there, just like colors on an artist's palette for us to use for our own creations. And being sentient beings that are here to serve us, when their masters are abusing them or misusing them, weaponizing them against other people, they have something to say about that as well, which is the source of a lot of cataclysmic storms and things that aren't artificially created by humans and things. So we have to really get back into alignment to understand those elements. Each one of those elements represents a different level of the ethers, and that's science of the elements and their activity at each level of the ether is true science, and what we are here to learn how to use for the betterment of all of us. And so we've got a ways to go as far as the mainstream catching up. That's the last thing, you'll ever hear in a conventional school of any type, medical, law, you name it.
I don't think they're ever catching up.
So that's what we're trying to bring back here, is just getting back in alignment with that. And like the alchemists of old, and the folks that used to get burnt at the stake and so forth for bringing out these concepts and trying to share this knowledge, we're back. And we're going to do it this time.
Speaking of alchemy, can I pick your brain? Yes, I can. Okay.
Yes.
So I pyrolyze all the biomass on my farm right now. I make lots of biochar. And I noticed this one little thing with whenever I pyrolyze a certain substance. Say I pyrolyze a big stock of maple leaves, dried maple leaves. After I do the pyrolization process, for those of you out there that don't know what pyrolysis is, it's when you cook something without oxygen. So I'll heat all these leaves up in a vessel above 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. All the volatiles leave, and then all I'm left with is the carbon. And the carbon is very diamagnetically charged because there was no oxidative stress from oxygen actually burning the leaves. But my question to you both is, whenever I pyrolyze anything after the process, it's like the first time I can actually see the plant that produced it. So in this example, like I see maple trees, I'm looking at maple trees all the time, but it's this weird thing. Like if I pyrolyze biomass from a maple tree, it's like the I don't know why I can't. The vivification of that maple tree now is like full on in my consciousness. I've done this with probably 8 or 9 different types of biomass. I even did it with a friend of mine has bamboo, and I pyrolyze bamboo locally. And now I can like see every single cane perfectly. It's like I can see the forest from the trees now, or the trees from the forest. Like how.
So are you talking about like an internal visualization kind of thing, or?
No, like in real time, in real life, like my visual acuity goes from like, say, well, I don't know how you rate that, 20/20. Like I have good vision anyway, but like I can see everything with so much more clarity and depth. It's almost like a psychonautic. It's almost like whenever you're with DMT or ayahuasca, you know how you can see, 3 times the visual acuity, 4 times the auditory acuity. It's almost like I go into like a psychedelic DMT like portal with whatever it is that I'm pyrolyzing. It was very weird because I was like, I never noticed this in Costa Rica because I was always in a cloud forest when I was doing this. So whether it was the smoke and the mist and whatever, it didn't really matter because I was always kind of living in a cloud. But now that I'm in the Ozarks and I do this, I have very nice weather here. And so when I do it, I'm not in a cloud anymore. And I'm like, whoa, like I can see this. And I have some alchemist friends, and I was like, do you think I'm like, there's something with the Negretto phase of alchemy that's causing this difference in clarity with how I can see it, because the volatiles are no longer in it. And now I'm just simpatico with the pure carbon matrix. that comprises it. So now I can actually see all the ancillary characteristics easier? Or am I like just smudging my property with smoke? And because I'm smudging my property with smoke, it somehow is cleaning up the energetics of it. Like, I don't know what's happening.
I have some thoughts, but Mike, do you want to say
I would
anything?
like to
Or
hear your thoughts because I mean, the only thing I would say is photons aren't real. Like, you know, they're so the way that they say the conical shape of our eye and all that stuff, the photons coming in, like that we actually see in different, on much different planes, right, of existence. And there are, you know, there's the etheric, the astral, and all this. So there could be something where you're tapping into the actual energetic spirit of the plant. And so now by cleansing it, you know, and releasing the spirit of it. So now you are more engaged with that specific spirit of the plant. And so now you are seeing it more clearly through your other higher faculties that are tapped in and with your eyes. And I've had that with fish before, like, I used to be really into fishing and got really close to the steelhead fish and sort of the nature of them. And I could start to really see them in the water when they're hard to see. And I could just look down, and I was with other anglers. I'm like, do you see those two right there in that eddy? And they're like, how the hell do you see that? And it could just be from a lot of fishing, but I feel like I tapped into their spirit and I could see them now. So
Yeah,
I
you had like
kind
a
of do get what you mean.
Schauberger, you had a Schauberger moment where your
Yeah.
consciousness displaces into the fish. It's something like that, because I actually was very disgruntled with any type of guru or anything when I was first introduced to Madre ayahuasca. But and nobody could ever explain to me my vision, because I recognize I see things very differently than most people from how I understand it. I see like just a matrix of kaleidoscopes, and I can focus in on those kaleidoscopes and make them into objects. And nobody had ever been able to explain to me what that was. And so when I asked her the first time I was with ayahuasca, and she showed me what that was, she showed me the tapestry of how light isn't a particle, it's not a photon, it's actually a string, and this string is all woven. And she showed me, like, she brought me through the whole thing. And I was like, okay, I'm going to use you as my science advisor. All of my scientific questions I was going to like run through, ayahuasca, because nobody had ever explained it to me, nobody had ever showed me what that actually was. So I'm feeling like there's something with the actual process of using, because we were talking about being balanced with the elementals, like being balanced with fire. Because when you do pyrolysis, it's not an out of control fire. It's actually such respect for the fire. And the fire is being routed and insulated in all these ways in which it's maximized. It's perfect. And it's
well,
you.
fire is purification.
There you go. So there's something with
So
this.
you're getting rid of a lot of that. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump over you there, but it's about getting rid of the extraneous so that you can see the pure form. Now, the reason why old school alchemists did what they did was not just to make plant medicine or mineral medicine, but it was in order to have a high level spiritual unfolding. And I have a lab where I have very sophisticated equipment and engage in those old school techniques.
Mhm.
And what you are doing is interjecting yourself into the whole creative cycle in a very sentient way,
Mhm.
where not only do you have procedures that you know will have certain outcomes, but also you're tuning in a certain way, just like an artist doing anything else. And if you want to default to the mechanics of what precipitates form in the first place, and we're talking about waveform mechanics, you understand there's two parts to that cycle. There's the precipitation cycle, which condenses or concentrates, compacts informational fields into eventually what we would consider as form and function. Simultaneously, there's a radiation cycle. And that radiation cycle is now relieving that compression of those information bits so that they flow back from the original thought form that created them. And they are there just laid bare to see as far as the original idea from that level of consciousness.
Mhm.
So if you look at carbon, which is the example you're using, that's a great one, because carbon, of course, is the major capacitor of all the other levels of ether in this electrical conveyance and modulation system that we call etheric precipitation in the first place. And carbon receives the information from the fire element, the hydrogen, that then is coagulated to the next level, the air ether, with under the presence of what we think of more as nitrogen, and then that goes to another level of chemical coagulation and modification as it enters the water ether, becomes water, and then each informational field all the way down is getting more concentrated until all of that is received on the ground with the carbon element, which is kind of the salt, we'll say, of what they would consider as far as the three elements: salt, mercury, spirit, of the old alchemist terminology. And then when you are now like an alchemist in the lab, firing that up with high temperatures and taking away the other elements like oxygen, as you mentioned, now what you're doing is freeing those informational fields, all the impurities that would maybe make the truth of that original pattern opaque in the first place, and laying everything bare for eyes that are able to see, which is what the journey of the alchemist is to be able to see everything firsthand, but then to duplicate exactly on the ground with their consciousness on other realms of their higher levels of consciousness that humans are not always aware of, to what's going on that level. So it's a unification of all the different parts of yourself, just like you're using in this case maybe maple tree, in order to, it goes through all the different phases, and now you're like an alchemist freeing all that, and you're seeing all ends of the two cycles of creation and actually interacting with it in a way, where it becomes very enlightening, because now you understand what the process is, and also develops a level of responsibility, I think, when you do that, because you realize that thoughts have consequences. So you are little less inclined to walk around all day with bullshit going through your head, or especially through your emotions, because the emotions in the level of our personal etheric body, which is the astral field or the emotional field, we'll say, that's what gives the intensity for those original ideas to pop, gives the velocity for those things to finally precipitate and be captured by the capacitor on the ground in order to create form and function, which is carbon in this case.
That makes so much sense that you say that, the release of informational packets, because I experienced something similar when I decided after I read like 6 books of Rudolf Steiner, I decided I was going to go away from vegetarianism, but I was only going to eat that which I killed. And I noticed that every time I killed and butchered an animal, I could, at the point of death of the animal, I could feel this wave go through me. And that's sort of like that informational packet, like the soul release or whatever that was like moved through me. And the conditioning from Steiner had me in the field of understanding that whatever I consume, and it becomes part of me and raises that to my vibrational level. And before I read Steiner, I thought I was just a murdering I thought it was bad man, right? But like, it just made me receptive to understanding that this energy, whatever it was that I was feeling on a physical and metaphysical level, was, for lack of a better word, just the information, the subtle information that was in the body. and it was then released and it would move through me. And then in my massage, I would feel that all the time, but to a much lesser extent, depending on what was going on for the client. So how you describe that makes a lot of sense to me, that that's what it would be, because I've actually been somewhat attuned to kind of feeling energetic patterns from other things in my environment. I wanted to ask you guys, because I know we only have a few minutes left, because of your sensitivities and because of your embodiment. And I know, Bear, you've been kind of dropping little hints that you foresee some real gnarliness coming. And I think anybody that has any intelligence at all kind of understands that, like we were talking earlier about sports and how how just crap the whole thing's become. There, what is it? What's the saying? Corruption breeds incompetence. So we're at a very high level of corruption on multiple different levels in multiple different venues, and there's a high level of incompetence. I don't know if you guys have flown as of late, but dude, air travel, I hate to make this prediction because I'm still going to fly, but like air travel is not as safe as it was 10 years ago with like the level of the folks that I see like moving in that realm. What's happening for you all? Like, what are you seeing? What are you able to share? Because any embodied man, part of our function is protection, and protection is our eyes are on the horizon. We see the invading hordes or whatever it is. Where are you guys at with what you're seeing on the West Coast?
I'll make a quick comment. I have some firm beliefs as far as what's coming for two reasons. One is that I'm older than you guys, and I've been, again, for whatever reason, focused on patterns since I was a kid, and just watching and understanding the why behind those patterns and watching those patterns gain momentum until all the events are happening that you're describing right now. Mm-hmm. The other thing, it's without sounding pretentious or full of whatever, I came in with a lot of memories of things.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And also along the way, for whatever reason, there are several remarkable individuals that took me under their wing at different key points in my life. And they always came at very specific year intervals. Now their whole story. And then they, in turn, gave me other memories. And it was for a very particular purpose. Mm-hmm. And let's just say historically, things have transpired exactly the way they're transpiring right now. And with those memories, I understand that what is happening right now has to happen right now, because we put certain energies, thoughts, and things in motion, and there's no way we can escape ourselves. And these things have to bear whatever fruit that we put out there in the first place. We're all responsible. We're all here to fix it. We're all playing different roles. And some of us that are playing the roles of being the memory banks and helping people prepare so that we can thrive and build anew on the other end are doing our job, while the other folks are pulling out all stops and trying to freak the hell out of us to try to dissuade us from doing that, which goes back into our earlier discussion, I think, as far as a rites of passage. And I think humanity right now is going through a collective rites of passage with all the historical unfoldments that are already happening, and especially the ramifications of those, which we haven't even begun to feel yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, so because I love that response, and I want a little hint of how that looks to you. Like, what because you made, I think it was your last Alpha Cast. I think you brought up something about they were sleeper cells, like there are like sleeper cell activity going on, and that's
Oh,
going to
that's
be.
just with the open borders. And I mean, they're bringing in armies,
Yeah,
to bring us down. I mean, that's just a fact, whether you
yeah.
believe it or not.
Well,
And I saw some associations at certain levels where folks are at the state capitol level in California, and they get to be flies on the wall and hear what's going on. And some of your recognizable, your Kamalas and your Hillarys and folks like that are meeting with people in this state regularly and deciding when they're going to pull the call for the sleeper cells. And a lot of these gangs and people that have been trained militarily on abandoned bases in this country, where a lot of them are brought and all equipped with the most sophisticated level of not just training but weaponry and so forth. They're very eager to get their marching orders, and they're there all the time with these notables at that level saying, is it time, is it time, is it time? So that's going to happen. No, I can't say that. It's ready to happen. It's all a done deal. Whether or not they get to finalize that, or if something else happens to prevent that in the first place, we'll see.
it's amazing. I was in Costa Rica last week, and they have for the first time, I lived there for 16 years. They have open borders for Venezuelans and Colombians. So right now there's just this mass migration of Venezuelans and Colombians coming up through Panama, Costa Rica, making their way to the United States. It's like completely, like,
Yeah.
you realize as a white dude what I had to go through every 3 months to keep my keep my jurisdiction correct living in Costa Rica. And now it's just like open borders. If you're South American, you have free reign, and all the crime and all, just the whole vibe of the Pura Vida coastal lifestyle is gone.
Yeah, I've heard it's been pretty wrecked. You were in Costa Rica
Yeah.
before it was trendy. Cool.
Yeah.
Like you were it's really sad. Costa Rica, are they one of the only countries never to have a standing army, right? Isn't that true?
Yeah, I mean, I moved there in 06 because of that. I was an
Mhm.
ashram guy, and I was really like, at the time I was, nonviolent communication.
Yep.
Like I said, I went to the opposite polarity of my football life.
Yeah.
And I was like teaching yoga, doing
Yeah.
massage at all these retreat centers, and I wasn't honoring the warrior side of myself, so I really loved the no army, the no standing army. In fact, most of us gringos had the shirt, no army since such and such,
Yeah.
and but I have since matured and I've moved, because COVID showed me the reality of the worldwide plan that's in place. Because I had the great privilege to have General Burt Stubblebine be one of my clients.
Oh, interesting.
And in 2009, he was showing me all of the UN documentation on Agenda 2030 and Agenda 21. And he and his wife at the time, Rima Labo, they were flying all over the world. And he was all heart. And he and I really bonded because in his regiment of remote viewers, they only had 2 criteria for people that could actually remote view. They had a near-death experience, and they saw strange lights in the sky. And I fit both of those criteria very well. And he was such a good dude. I love that man. And everything he showed me, like you were saying, Bear, you've had certain people in your life that said, hey, look, this and this, and I swear to you, everything that man showed me has come to pass. Like they even said in some of these documents, they explained, like, it finally made sense to me why they're doing all of the chemtrailing. Because in UN documents, they look at humans as biofilters. We're literally designated as biofilters. And from their perspective, it's a lawful act to return minerals, elements. I forget all the different terminology they have back to the ground, and using humans as the filters for that. Like everything.
And in the process, you release the energy of the human battery, which is a battery. You're an accumulation of light. And then if they can requalify that, I don't buy photons and particles and things, but we'll just use the photonic kind of terminology. If they can release that photonic energy in a reduced modulated state that's more akin to lower human emotions, then they can utilize that.
Yes. And he was such a cool dude because he was in the 60s on the forefront of exploring consciousness and exploring the subtle realms, and using like their whole model for remote viewing was such that this is not a physical realm. A coordinate is a coordinate is a coordinate, because it's not that there's this physical spot over here. It's just a place in consciousness. And so they use the dual model of like, you had the person that gave the coordinate, and then you had the traveler. And for me, as soon as
was he with like Ingo Swann and what was the other guy's name? Russell Targ and those kind of innovators. They were like, I think that's what like the Men Staring at Goats was kind of based on and stuff. Like, was he involved with that kind of on that level?
I'm pretty sure he was the army. He was the army general that was overseeing the whole thing. Wow. Those guys were under his wing. He was dishonorably discharged. They had to do their whole cover up and say it didn't work and all the rest of it. We didn't I connected with him on such a personal level because I was explaining to him like what I was going through, and I was trying to help him with, getting his coffee farm off the ground because they had terrible soil. And I was just like this budding permaculturist, and he liked my vibe. But like the whole thing with what he was saying to me and what he was showing me, he just showed me just literal documents. And I was just like, I had already had the education through G.W. Griffith of like, they write all this stuff down. It's all written down. They write these plans down. And so it's
part of their spelling magic.
Yeah. And to them, it absolves them of their karma around it or whatever. Like, hey, we told you, it's Roman law. If you're too stupid to know what we're doing to you, you deserve it.
Well, I'll say this. I think it's going to come down to the wire. I think all great movies are true stories, and this true story is a great movie. And we're all here to play a role as a hero in our own life about it. And it's the great spiritual sort of casting that we all have taken for the movie. As a film major, I always relate it to film, right? But and I do believe we've all come here because we're in the final act, and we get to see it unfold. And it's going to come down to the wire, and it's going to be each individual's decision on how we approach it. And that's going to be, I believe, the splitting off of the times and where you end up. And I do believe we're going to have a splitting where you're going to have those who make the one kind of decision, the spiritual decision to do the right thing, are going to spiral off into a new reality. And those who don't then kind of basically cast off into the denser reality. And that just goes that way and that goes that way. I've kind of thought that since I was a little kid, and I've known that. And that's why I think why I was connected with Bear. It was like magnetic in that way, because I've always thought in these ways, and why I got my family the heck out of LA in 2016 and moved up to the middle of the woods up here, basically, because I saw that one, I didn't want to raise my kids in LA, but two, that the physicality that's going to be required to go through this is going to be in a way where you're going to want to be in a place that's tapped into resilient natural resources and allow you to get through it. And I think that's part of the spiritual process. And I do believe that if you're really tapped in, you can get through in the city. It's just going to be really hard. And you've really chosen that hard path for a reason. And God bless you for that. But I do believe that it's going to come down to the wire in our lifetime now, that and we get to all experience it.
Awesome. I'm down. I moved to an area where it's open carry. Like, the men around here, they're like, the gun culture here is beautiful. There's no crime because of that.
Yeah.
And I knew being in Costa Rica, I was the witch. Foreigners are always the witch, and it's always burn the witch. And I saw that during COVID.
Yeah.
And so now I'm really interested because I'm now a neophyte to the North American culture. Like I'm just, 9-10 months in. And so I'm still trying to get my footing with like what the vibe is here, and understanding. That's why I love talking to gentlemen like you that, have been firmly entrenched, essentially your entire lives here, and just see like, get the feel of where you're at with preparation, and just with, because I see you're like, Bear, you're now like an Instagram phenom. Like you're all your videos that you've been putting. I mean,
that is very frightening to hear that.
And ironically hilarious too, because it's the last thing he ever would want to be.
That's why I said it. That's exactly why I said it, because I could kind of tell that there's a little apprehension in it, but it's still like what you're putting out. Everybody, like from an electroculture perspective, is like, oh, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Because I'm a soil guy with the carbon and everything, and so I've been talking about electroculture forever. So I really appreciate all the videos that you've been putting out with that. But like, we're all, increasing the quality of our inputs, trying to increase the quality of our outputs, and we all kind of have our fingers on the pulse. My finger on the pulse has been a little bit more international. So I just love to hear, because I have zero experience on the West Coast, like what you guys are actually going through.
Well, I mean, where we live, I was just going to say, Bear, where we live, it's like,
well, you're going to say the exact same thing I was going to say, so go for it.
Yeah, people's vision of like living on the West Coast might be, I don't know, LA or even like San Francisco or the Bay Area. We essentially live in some of the most rugged country in Northern America, on arguably the cleanest river in North America, in a very isolated pocket of America. So it's hard to even say we live in California, except of the residents that we have with the great, spirit of California, which is ancient. And so we're in a place where when people visit are awestruck by its beauty, its resources, natural resources, the wilderness around us. So we're not affected in a way that someone might be that living in the Bay Area or San Diego even, or somewhere like that, because it's not our reality. Our reality is our pocket of our little community we have here. I mean, I live in a little town of 600 people. Bear and Deb in the Alphabetic Farm is extremely isolated in an off-grid on a little area 25 miles from the closest power line. And we're fortunate enough to have amazing neighbors, and everybody knows everybody. And there's a resilience here. There's a spirit of sort of a classic Americana here. That's why I opened up AlphaCast with the great state of Jefferson, which was a separatist movement in the 1970s, to basically like a libertarian movement of, F you, California and Oregon, we're going to do it ourselves kind of thing. And that is the spirit here. That is the spirit that still thrives. It's very agrarian. It's very also skeptical about anything that is being offered from the mainstream. Very old school, very hardy people, nose to the grindstone, work, blue collar, those that have multi-generation. Like, I'm kind of not seen as a witch by any means, but I will never be considered a local because I'm from SoCal. But they've accepted me because I'm a volunteer firefighter and, am an honest, real person. But yeah, this is like my kids get to grow up in a place like it's like the 1970s or 80s here still. So to ask us what it's like on the West Coast, we're not the best people to ask probably, because we literally have such a different reality.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, but you have tentacles though.
Yes.
You have people that that know, and that's what I'm talking
about. And so like definitely LA. I like my business partners that do Music in Sky. They're still in LA. They're now planning to get out, and we were looking to start to buy some property up in Southern Oregon, or this area somewhere close to me, so that we can do Music in Sky up here and get the hell out of LA. We have other friends and family that have gotten out of there, all have left the Bay Area, like all have left San Francisco. There is definitely an overall sensibility that the cities in California are essentially being planned for a total apocalypse. I have heard through the birdie here from a fellow firefighter who works for the state that the higher ups were talking about the plan for the mega cities that are being planned to be built off the I-5, and to reroute everybody from the wilderness into those by 2030. So they're a little behind now. And then, of course, the megalopolis between LA to Phoenix and the superhighway they're building and all that, and all this Agenda 2030 stuff. But it seems like there's a lot of spinning out around that, because, I mean, it's already 2020. We're going into 2024, and that ground hasn't been broken. So I think overall, it's just about generating the fear enough that they can to try to maintain control. And so I think a lot of it is just narrative and fake offers, and to sucker people into the fear so that they can try to maintain their control and route people into what they already have set up, which are these terrible cities. And make it I do think they're making it as hard as possible to live where we live through by creating natural disasters, especially through insurance companies. With the fires here, it's getting really hard to get insured. And also I've heard in storm areas too. And then the insurance companies make it really difficult when your homes are damaged to get coverage, or they force you out in many ways. And so they're doing a lot of tricks and games like that as well, for sure. And so you definitely want to be in a place where you have abundant natural resources, resilient community, and really a sheriff that has your back. In the United States is super important. Go ahead, Bear.
No, I was gonna say we have a great sheriff. I've got to know him, and he comes up and just gets out of his car. We're all dirt roads around here, and the neighborhood. When I first, we're from Northern California originally, raised our kids in Hawaii and Fiji, and then came back to because the kids want to go through college, back in about 2000 or something, and so here we are back again, and you can see how the beast is kind of migrated further and further north. What used to be once pretty wild areas in Northern California, have been tamed, like Humboldt County, which used to be the Emerald Triangle, with all the renegades and everything living there growing weed. That's just become an extension of the Bay Area. But what we have going for us
is the extension of
further north.
Blue-haired mask cult. Go ahead.
Yeah. And it used to be the Wild West. But where we're at, a lot further north, is the terrain is so rugged that they really can't develop it. So we have that going for us. And just to give you an idea about the mentality of our neighborhood, we're entirely off grid. For miles, no cell service, no power lines, no nothing. And it's not a big community, and you can't see your neighbor. We're all spread out. And what do you think? There's maybe a dozen of us up here, Mike. And, what's different too about extremely surrounded by wilderness self-doers is, it's really upscale. Everybody's got nice places, and, it's not like old funky cars riding on the landscape and meth labs and stuff. It's really kind of a high-end experience. all, but we're entirely off grid, and everybody's, takes pride in their things. Anyway, what I was getting at is when we first bought this farm and moved into this community about 7 years ago, and because we were further south in Humboldt, off grid down there. And I met a couple of our neighbors, and we're sitting around, and I had all these plans I wanted to do, and I just wanted to kind of get the vibe of how people operate in this neck of the woods. And I just said, so what do you guys do when you want to build something? Do you guys, because I never am a believer in permits or anything. And so I asked this one person, I said, so do you guys do permits around here or whatever? And she looked at me with absolute disdain. And she said, you mean ask for permission? Now, this person, like the rest of our neighbors, these neighbors, they don't know necessarily all the details and, and all the stuff that we understand about the agenda, but they just have ingrained in that, F this, nobody's going to tell us what to do. So, it's
that's
awesome.
The American
That's kind
spirit.
of people
That's
that are
the American
here.
spirit. You ask about the American spirit growing up here. It is that. It's like, it is this concept of, I understand who I am, and that I am the sole proprietor of the decisions of my life and what I do. And in doing that, I have full responsibility for my actions. And if I am a dick, well, it'll come back hard on me. And that's how it is out there too, especially where Barre is. Like, if you have an issue with somebody, you go take it on head on. You don't call the sheriff. You don't call the, you go up and you deal with it. And there's a certain, we've lost that in society now. And you see that in the cities where these roaming hordes of teens are just robbing places and stuff. There's just no accountability or sense of self-respect or any concept of what it is to be a man anymore, or a living embodied woman or man. So
it's also justified in that they're saying, well, we're victims, so therefore we get to take whatever we want. So, and again, of course, that's the victim consciousness, the opposite of self-responsibility that's been inculcated in all these recent generations.
Yeah. Well, I think Missouri kind of shares what you guys are experiencing. Missouri was the only state to say F you to, what is it? The alcohol, tobacco, and fire.
Oh, right.
ATF. They said, no, all your laws around guns, they don't pertain to us. Go away.
I'm not a fan of any politician, but I do like Josh Hawley from Missouri.
Yeah. So
if you're familiar with him at all, he's a senator, U.S. senator.
I'm a little bit. I'm just now, once again, dipping my toes into understanding what my surroundings are locally.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, this has been really brilliant. I really appreciate that you guys come on the BioCharisma podcast, and I feel like our friendship is burgeoning and has a long time to explore. At some point, we'll talk about biochar. I'd love to know your opinion about biochar. And
carbon. We could have some really fun conversations about the whole carbon element and approach it from all sorts of angles.
Yeah, my goal with this podcast is to get to know you both. So I feel like I know you a little bit better, and look forward to future conversations.
Well, we look forward to having. It's fun. We look forward to having you back on AlphaCast too. So let's get that booked, because our community is kind of intermesh and are very much the same. In fact, I saw a picture from the Bertaria festival where actually I even have one of your stickers here. But it was like a picture of all these stickers, and there was an Alpha Vedic next to the BioCharisma podcast there on a table. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, we have a lot of boom. Yep, it was that one. Yeah. So yeah, man, been such a pleasure. Thanks for having us on, and we hope to hang out in person someday for sure.
Definitely.
I'd like to do a Missouri trip. We have a couple friends that are thinking about moving there now, but we've got Matt Presti's there. I don't know if they're anywhere close to you.
I'm actually going to go see Matt Presti in 2 weeks, where I'm going to do
give him a big hug for me.
In-person interview.
No way.
I met him through the Walter Russell, university and everything. So
Beautiful.
Awesome person.
Oh, an amazing guy. I got to hang out with him this year, and he actually saved me the night I was poisoned. So when you do see him, say Winter says thank you. He and his beautiful partner absolutely saved me. So he is a wonderful soul.
That's
And
wonderful.
Marty Leeds is out there now.
Yeah, we're gonna build him a church.
Yep.
Nice
Oh,
little
sweet.
A yurch. I thought he was building a yurch.
a yurt,
church.
something like that.
That's great.
We're gonna do something that's gonna be fun. I know it's gonna have curves involved.
Nice.
Yeah, I think right now he's just doing a yurch just to get by, but I'm sure you guys will end up doing something really awesome structure-wise. That'll be really cool.
Yeah, and that's something we should talk about for you because of the fire is like the when I infuse my aircrete with biochar, it fireproofs it. So
So I'd like to
Amazing.
talk to you more about that.
yeah. So like especially if you use magnesium cement in your aircrete mix and you use biochar, dude, you can handle up to 10,000 degrees. Excuse me, not 10,000.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
2,000 degrees Celsius, so like around 3,700 degrees Celsius. I always get these mixed up. 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 3,700 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's hot.
Celsius. Yeah, hot as hell. Yeah, let's come back on and we'll talk more about that stuff because I'd love to know more. That's going to be something Bear and I will be investigating is fire protection. With my DJ background, I want to create a sort of a sonic shield because I've seen some interesting stuff with audio, with sound waves and reflecting fire. So,
cool.
yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So, lots to talk about there. They're never going to burn us out. We're never leaving. I'm going to once again, and the angels have our back. And I can tell many stories about that, as I'm sure Bear and Deb went through that as well recently. So thanks so much, Topher. We could talk all day. Better get going here.
You guys have a wonderful
Thanks,
afternoon.
Topher.
See you.
Hey, you too. Take care.
You ought to know. Well, now you ought to know by now.
I hope you enjoyed the podcast with Dr. Bear Lando and Mike Winter of the Alpha Vita podcast on YouTube. Those guys are cool. I've really appreciated the content that they put out. And as you could tell, we had a little teaser for the next time we speak. I think we'll definitely get into more of the biochar infused aircrete domes. That's something that has been flashing in my consciousness for a good 6 or 7 years now, knowing that there are enemies at the gate, if you know what I mean. So yeah, those dudes are really cool. I'm sure if you're listening to me, you've listened to their podcast, and you just like the last few guests, you just know that they're walking the walk. So thank you for joining the BioCharisma podcast. Our numbers are doing really well. Been receiving analog super chats from people. Just really cool stuff. You guys are just awesome. Precision Barber Bear sent me these really cool lily impellers that he 3D printed. A bunch of other people sent me water wands. I got some copper farming implements. I do have a PO box. I don't know how to tell you what it actually is though. You have a PO box for analog super chats, but I don't know I don't know what the address is. Is it just the address of the postal service? I'll tell you next time. It's not important. If you appreciate, reciprocate on the Topher HQ website, you can go to donate. Also, the PayPal is coraldomes@gmail if you want to donate that way. I am now taking clients for Celestic Profiling. That's where I read your chart of the luminaries at the time of your conception. So I'm going to do a big reveal on that with my boy down in Aussie land and his lady, Tom Barnett. And as soon as I know when we're going to do that, I will announce that. And I want to roll out the entire idea behind it. I've been beta testing it for 2 years. It's remarkable. It's odd, because we are a fractal of the whole. And so in some way you could find any characteristic about anything, about any perspective, locked in every single person. But when you actually understand the original, I guess you say, not original, let's say the primal design of you, what I've noticed with each one of the people that hear it, the overwhelming response is just relief. In a lot of astrology and a lot of electional things, like people have more and more questions, and it's like, oh, what's going to happen? And there's not like really a faith of anything. It's just like a sort of a mental masturbation. It's very revealing, and sometimes it can be somewhat accurate. But what I found with the celestic profiling is that you understand yourself so much better. And when you understand yourself so much better, there's a relief. Like there's like whatever internal judgment you had going on kind of dissipates. And when that internal critic is ejected and your identity becomes cleaner, then you come to the forefront and you recognize a lot of the self-talk and a lot of the things that were not suiting you go away, which is really nice. So I will be opening a store on the BioCharisma, I'll be opening a store at Topher HQ. We will be selling the Mojo cells, rocket retort plans, the celestic profiling, eventually rocket mass heaters. I'm going to be a distributor for the Mayu swirl, all these things, and that will help essentially. This will be my main job. This will be what I do. So I doubt that my travels will take me that much further away from the house now that my daughter is getting older. I don't want to be away from the house that much. And so you guys spreading the word of the podcast, telling your friends, sharing it, liking it, all these things help so much. And if you're getting something from this, any little bit that you can throw this way, I'll even have like things like t-shirts and stuff like that, just really simple, low cost items. All that helps support me and my endeavors. And I promise to bring you innovation. I promise to bring you authentic life experience that will enrich you. I am wealthy and not wealthy from a monetary sense, but I am wealthy with gratitude, and that gratitude is rewarded through revelation and experience, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I really love my life. So I know you people that have been listening to this for a while understand that about me. So thank you so much again, and I will see you guys next week.